There's no more iconic scene in Western movies than the good old-fashioned pistol duel, where the lawman and the outlaw meet at high noon to see who's faster on the draw. In actuality, this kind of thing very rarely occurred, and the true-life Western stories, like Wild Bill Hickok being shot in the back while playing cards, tell a much more gruesome and less gallant tale. Still, there's no denying that among the bandits and lawmen of the day, there were a number of larger-than-life gunfighters whose exploits helped pave a bloody path for the characters that would later populate Western movies and dime novels. Watch till the end of this video to find out the most famous and downright deadliest gunslingers in the history of the Old West. James Wild Bill Hickok. James Butler Hickok was a well-known gunman in the Old West. Hickok was a gunfighter, gambler, showman, and peace officer who may have killed more than 100 people in his lifetime. Hickok was born in Illinois on May 27, 1837, to William Alonzo and Polly Butler Hickok. His father was a passionate anti-slavery activist, and it's possible that their house was a stopping point on the Underground Railroad. Hickok was a good shooter when he was young, and he had a solid reputation in his hometown. In 1858, he became a constable in Monticello Township. A few years later, he joined the Russell, Waddell, and Majors Freight Company, which ran the Pony Express. In 1865, Hickok and David Tutt engaged in a lot of fights, which led to a gunfight where Hickok killed Tutt with a single shot from 75 yards away. Hickok was cleared of all charges because he said he did what he did in self-defense. On August 2, 1876, Jack McCall shot Wild Bill Hickok in the head while they were playing five-card draw poker in Deadwood, South Dakota. He did this to get back at Hickok for what he thought was an insult. When Hickok was killed, he had aces and eights in his hand. These cards became known as the Dead Man's Hand. John Wesley Hardin. John Wesley Hardin was born in Texas in 1853 to James Gibson "Gip" Hardin and Mary Elizabeth Dixon. Hardin Sr. was a Methodist minister who moved his family to Trinity County, Texas in 1859. He opened a school for the kids in the area, including his own. When the Civil War broke out, John Wesley tried to run away to join the Confederate Army. The first time Hardin killed was in November 1868 when he was 15 years old. He shot a former slave who was allegedly trying to hurt him with a stick. At the time, Union soldiers were living in Texas, so his father told him to hide. When his location was found out, he killed the 3 Union soldiers sent to get him. He then had to run away from home. Hardin rode with the outlaw Frank Polk in Navarro County until Polk was caught for murder. Hardin drifted around, leaving a trail of dead bodies behind him. In Pisgah, he shot a man in the eye over a bet, and in Leon County, Texas, he killed a black man. In Hill County in 1870, Benjamin Bradley threatened Hardin with a knife when Hardin was winning a card game with him. Hardin walked away, but Bradley caught up with him later and shot at him, missing. In response, Hardin shot Bradley in the head and the chest. Later that month, he killed a man in Limestone County after an argument, and 2 weeks later, he shot a man who tried to rob him. In 1871, Hardin was arrested for killing a Texas marshal named Laban John Hoffman. However, he got away after killing another police officer named Jim Smalley. After killing more people over the next 3 years, the Texas Rangers caught Hardin and sent him to Texas State Prison in Huntsville for 25 years. While he was in prison, Hardin studied religion and the law, but his health deteriorated. After 17 years in prison, he was released and became an attorney in El Paso. After an argument with a Selman Jr. in April 1895, John Selman Sr. shot Hardin in the back of the head, killing him. Hardin was laid to rest in El Paso. John King Fisher. John King Fisher was the child of Job and Lucinda Warren Fisher and was born in the state of Texas in the year 1853. He began getting into problems at the age of 16 for stealing horses and spent time in and out of prison as a result of his criminal activity. Around 1870, he became a member of a band of bandits that preyed upon Mexican ranchers. Following a dispute with the other members of the gang, Fisher ended up killing 3 of them, assuming the role of leader and proceeding to execute 7 Mexican bandits. In the year 1884, Fisher and his close buddy Ben Thompson went to the Turner Hall Opera House in San Antonio to watch a performance. After the performance, Fisher and Thompson left the theater and made their way to the upper level of the Vaudeville Variety Theater, where they met with the theater's owner, Joe Foster. They were ambushed there. Thompson suffered a gunshot wound to the head and passed away at the scene. Fisher pulled his weapons, but he was ultimately murdered with a total of 13 gunshots. His bones were first interred on the ranch that he owned, but were eventually transferred to the Pioneer Cemetery in Uvalde, Texas. Tom Horn Jr. Thomas Horn Jr. was born in Missouri on November 21, 1860, to Thomas S. Horn Sr. and Marianne Marika Miller Horn. He was abused by his father, which motivated him to leave home at 16. The U.S. Cavalry hired him as a scout and interpreter during the Apache Wars. He was a part of the mission to find Geronimo and was present at his surrender. In the 1880s, Horn was popular as a tracker and a bounty hunter. He was hired by the Pinkerton Detective Agency, but was forced to resign after he was associated with the murders of 17 men. In 1901, Horn got involved in a feud between the Miller and Nickel families in Iron Mountain, Wyoming. 14-year-old Willie Nickel was found murdered. A month later, his father Kells was killed, and most of his stock was slaughtered. Because of a dubious identification by 2 of the Nickel children, and Horn's drunken boasts about the murder of young Willie, he was arrested and convicted of murder. Thomas Horn was hanged the day before his 43rd birthday in 1903 and buried in Columbia Cemetery, Boulder, Colorado. Ironically, some modern historians have claimed that on this particular occasion, Horn was actually innocent. Still, there is no denying that he was responsible for a great many other killings. Some historians have reasoned that he may have had a hand in as many as 50 murders. Jim Killer Miller. One of the most downright murderous figures of the Old West, Jim Killer Miller was an assassin and gunfighter who was credited with killing at least 14 people, though legend has it that the number is somewhere closer to 50. James Brown Miller was born October 25, 1861 in Van Buren, Arkansas, to Jacob and Cynthia Basham Miller, but he was raised in Texas. One of the most famous stories about him involves a confrontation he had with a sheriff named Bud Frazier over Miller's alleged involvement in the murder of a cattle rancher. In 1884, Miller shot John Thomas Coop, his sister's husband, in the head after an argument. Miller spent time as a town marshal in Pecos and married Sally Clements in 1891. For a short time, Miller was an upstanding citizen and was committed to the Methodist Church. After a long-standing feud with Pecos Sheriff George A. Fraser, Miller shot Fraser in a Toyah, Texas saloon. Several members of the prosecution and men who had testified against Miller were mysteriously killed. Miller was never convicted for any of the deaths. In 1900, Miller began offering his services as a paid assassin, committing over 6 murders for hire. Described as being cold to the core, Miller famously declared that he would kill anyone for money, and is rumored to have gunned down everyone from political figures to famed Sheriff Pat Garrett. After the murder of Alan Bobbitt, he was arrested and jailed. Breaking into the jail, an angry mob took Miller and 2 other prisoners to the gallows, where they were hanged. Sam Bass. Sam Bass was born on July 21, 1851, in Mitchell, Indiana. Sam Bass started out an honest man. He had a simple and modest dream of moving to Texas and becoming a cowboy. Eventually, he did just that, but decided after one season that he didn't like it. While transitioning from simple farmer to famed outlaw might be a stretch for some, Bass did it seamlessly. After failing to succeed in business, he joined a group of outlaws and began robbing stagecoaches. After several such robberies, Bass and his gang decided to rob the Union Pacific Gold Train from San Francisco, collecting more than $60,000. It is still the largest robbery of any train on the Union Pacific Railroad. He was pursued by the Pinkerton National Detective Agency and the Texas Rangers. After one of the gang turned informant, Bass and his men were ambushed by Texas Ranger Sergeant Richard Ware and Ranger George Harold in Round Rock, Texas, where the gang attempted to rob the Williamson County Bank. Bass killed Williamson County Deputy Sheriff A.W. Grimes. Bass himself was shot, but he escaped and was found lying in a field west of Round Rock. He died the next day. Dallas Stoudenmeier. Although not as well known as many of the others, Dallas Stoudenmeier was a feared lawman in his day and is known for participating in more gunfights than most of his better-known contemporaries. Dallas Stoudenmeier was born in Bullock County, Alabama on December 11, 1845, to Louis and Elizabeth Stoudenmeier. When he was 15, he attempted to join the Confederacy to fight in the Civil War, but he was discharged when his true age was revealed. A few years later, he re-enlisted and served as a private in Company F, 45th Alabama Infantry Regiment. He was wounded several times but stayed in service until the end of the war. Stoudenmeier had a reputation for being tough and short-tempered when he was drinking. After moving to El Paso, Texas to serve as sheriff, he killed 3 men before the end of his 3rd day in the 4 dead in 5 seconds gunfight. This marked the beginning of what would become a blood spree perpetuated by Stoudenmeier, killing 6 more men in gunfights over the next year and gaining a reputation as one of the most fearless lawmen in all of Texas. Stoudenmeier got involved in a feud with members of the Manning family, which ended when he and 3 of the Manning brothers got into a gunfight. Stoudenmeier was shot from behind by James Manning and died instantly. He was buried in Alleytown Cemetery in Colorado County, Texas. Clay Allison. Robert Clay Allison was born to Jeremiah Scotland Allison, a Texas cattle rancher and Presbyterian minister, and Mariah Ruth Brown Allison on September 2, 1841 in Tennessee. Allison fought for the Confederacy under Captain W.H. Jackson and General Nathan Bedford Forrest in the Civil War. The Allison family moved to New Mexico after the war. In January of 1874, Allison and fellow outlaw Chunk Colbert enjoyed a race on their horses and afterward went to dinner at the Clifton House in Colfax County. The two had a history of disagreements, and with no warning, Colbert pulled out his pistol to shoot Allison. But when his gun bumped the table as he drew, Allison reacted by shooting Colbert in the head. He was asked why he was having dinner with a man who wanted to kill him, and Allison replied, "I wouldn't want to send a man to hell on an empty stomach." Over the next several years, Allison was reported to have killed several men over disagreements, and in one case, he decapitated a man and brought the severed head into a saloon. He was also known to have participated in lynchings and vigilante murders. In 1880, Allison relocated to Mobeetie, Texas, where he met and married America Medora Dora McCulloch. Together, they bought a ranch near the Pecos River. Allison died in 1887 when he broke his neck after falling from a wagon. He was buried in Pecos Cemetery. His body was later moved to the courtyard next to the Orient Hotel Museum. Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Barry Stapp Earp was born in Warren County, Illinois on March 19, 1848. His father, Nicholas Porter Earp, moved the family to Iowa, where Earp spent most of his childhood. He married Urilla Sutherland, but she and her unborn child died of typhoid fever about a year later. After the death of his wife, Earp began drinking heavily and drifted around until he joined his brother in Wichita, Kansas in 1874. After several years of working as an officer of the law, he moved to Dodge City along with his brother. Wyatt became a marshal and met and befriended John Doc Holliday. By 1879, he had moved to Tombstone with his brothers Virgil and James, and got involved in a feud with Tom and Frank McClory, and Ike and Billy Clanton. The result was the gunfight at the OK Corral in 1881. After his brother Morgan was killed in retaliation, Wyatt embarked on a mission to kill everyone associated with Morgan's death. Wyatt moved to California and married Josephine Marcus in 1882. They moved to Idaho, opened a saloon, and mined for gold. In 1899, the Earps went to Alaska during the gold rush and again opened a successful saloon. They returned to California around 1911 and settled in Los Angeles, where they became a popular fixture in Hollywood as Earp served as a technical advisor for Old West films. Wyatt died on January 13, 1929 in Los Angeles at the age of 80. His ashes were interred in Jewish Hills of Eternity Cemetery in Colma, California. Billy the Kid. The most legendary of all gunslingers, Henry "Billy the Kid" McCarty started his life of crime with petty theft and horse thievery, but he is said to have made his first kill at the age of 18. Though often portrayed as a cold-blooded killer, history shows that he actually entered a life of crime out of necessity, not meanness. In fact, people who knew him called him brave, resourceful, loyal, and possessing a remarkable sense of humor. Henry McCarty, aka William H. Bonney, was born in 1859 in New York City to Patrick McCarty and Catherine Devine. He started out by getting caught stealing food, clothing, and guns in 1875, but he escaped his captors and made his way to Arizona. In 1877, he argued with and killed a blacksmith. Later that year, he was deputized during the Lincoln County War and joined lawmen searching for a group of men who had murdered a rancher. The group called themselves the Regulators, but soon it gained its own reputation for violence, and its members were branded as outlaws. The group went on a killing spree, killing 3 people within 3 days, including a sheriff and a deputy. When the group was broken up by law enforcement officers, the Kid escaped and shot a gambler in a New Mexico saloon. After more problems with the law, Bonney was captured and sentenced to death. He escaped and killed the men guarding him. After 3 months, Sheriff Pat Garrett and his 2 deputies shot and killed the Kid at Fort Summer on July 14, 1881. Myra Maybelle Shirley Reed Starr, aka Belle Starr. Born in Carthage, Missouri, Myra Maybelle Shirley grew up with Cole Younger and later befriended the James brothers. When the James Younger gang needed a place to hide out, they often stayed at the Shirley family farm, earning her the nickname the Bandit Queen. In 1866, Belle married Jim Reed, a former Confederate Army guerrilla who tried to live the respectable life of a farmer. But when that failed, fell in with the Starrs, a Cherokee Indian family known for horse stealing. Along with his wife's friends, the Jameses and the Youngers, Myra and Jim planned and executed many successful heists. Jim, however, was killed while trying to escape from a deputy sheriff who had arrested him for one such robbery. After the loss of her husband, Belle made her living organizing and planning robberies, as well as fencing stolen goods, and is said to have shot at least 3 men during these years. Known for seducing law enforcement officers to get what she wanted when she couldn't bribe them, she then married Sam Starr in 1880. After 2 years of horse rustling, the pair was caught and convicted of stealing horses. Released a year later, the two went right back into crime, with Belle said to have murdered at least 2 more men who got in her way. Belle herself was shot to death on February 3, 1889, 2 days before her 41st birthday, while riding home from the general store. Her killer has never been found. Who can be said to have been the deadliest gunslinger of them all? The one with the most kills? The one said to have been the fastest? Or perhaps the one with the reputation for being the most ruthless? Whatever the measure, these gunslingers came to define what it meant to be bad to the bone during this age when men and women lived by the gun. Even if many of these fatalities linked to these gunmen were carried out within the confines of the law, the urban legends and rumors regarding the number of people each of them murdered continue to contribute to the mystery still surrounding them. That's it for today. See you in the next video.